go through these different phases, like in our spiritual journeys, and the first one really is self-awareness, like my goodness, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? And oftentimes, it might come from a dark place, and then it sets us off on these journeys of discovery. And eventually we get to a place where it is embodied. And for me, embodiment is, yeah, that integrity I was speaking to earlier, really where like the mind and the body and the spirit are all in alignment and all matching. And it's like truly, it's not just thinking about a concept, it's truly like being that. So it's not just like thinking about love, it's how do I how do I make love my frequency by my words and my thoughts and my energy and my action? Same thing with awareness, like even cosmic consciousness or something like that. How do I go beyond just like talking about it, or worse, even like performing it, and make it into like, how do I bring it into my body? How do I bring it into my being? How do I bring it into my actions, my frequency? So I love that phrase because I think it's really like what a lot of people are talking about right now, and I think for a very good reason. I think we've all seen spiritual teachers and leaders who do not, what do they say, like walk their talk. They don't actually embody what they are, who they say are saying they are, and what they are teaching.
Namaste, beautiful souls. I'm Shilpa, and you're tuned into the Omni Mindfulness podcast, a sanctuary for spiritual entrepreneurs. As a holistic mindfulness coach and social marketing strategist, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey. On this show, we explore captivating stories and provide practical tools that deepen your connection with your authentic self. Through the personal and professional narratives of remarkable individuals, we expand our consciousness and ignite the spark of possibility. Each season, I curate content that empowers you to create a holistic lifestyle encompassing spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. Join me as we engage in conversations with experts in their respective fields and share solo casts from yours truly, all aimed at supporting you and relaxing, revitalizing, resetting your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and the visionary behind Omni Mindfulness. So what if just one story had the power to shift the trajectory of your life? What if you could become an instrument in helping others realize their true selves? And what if your soul's higher purpose lies in experiencing the joy of Omni Mindfulness? Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Welcome to Season 8 of the Omni Mindfulness podcast. During this exciting season, we delve deep into the power of mindset. In October, join us as we explore Happy Mind. Is happiness an inside-out job? We'll explore the concept of happiness from various perspectives, ranging from DNA and brain health to mindfulness practices. Moving into November, it's all about conscious connections. Loneliness can be an epidemic, especially during the holidays. Let's understand the art of forming meaningful connections. And in December, we wrap up 2023 with the theme Embodied Awareness. Discover how to connect your body, mind, and spirit for a holistic approach to life. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations, expert insights, and transformative stories. It's a season you won't want to miss. My next guest is Lauren Leduc. Lauren is a visionary teacher, intuitive, mentor, and mama with the special gift of cultivating community and creating accessible experiences. Lauren has taught thousands of students with her approachable and intelligent methodology. She is compassionate, thoughtful, and deeply invested in creating opportunities for others to grow and shine. At the age of 17, Lauren was diagnosed with anorexia, which spiraled into a decade of anxiety, depression, and medical problems, and a feeling of purposelessness. With a great deal of support from her family and loved ones, Lauren discovered a plethora of tools to heal herself and ultimately become a beacon of inspiration for others on the spiritual path. In 2015, Lauren founded Pop-Up Yoga KC, a popular outdoor yoga program in Kansas City, Missouri. Lauren soon found a permanent home for her pop-up yoga program, which became True Yoga Love, Kansas City's trauma-informed yoga classes, and a yoga teacher certified program that has certified 125 teachers and counting. Lauren True Love Yoga 200-hour yoga teacher training is widely known for its culturally respectful approach, deep roots in yoga philosophy, and a firm commitment to safe and intelligent teaching methodology. After teaching thousands of hours of yoga and committing deeply to her studies, Lauren felt the call to expand her soul's purpose by becoming a certified Dharma coach and spiritual life coach in 2022. With her natural inclination to guide others in an intuitive way, Lauren fortified her coaching training by becoming a certified intuitive reader. As a yoga teacher, spiritual life coach, energy healer, and intuitive reader, Lauren will soon be unveiling her signature one-on-one offering, which combines her multifaceted expertise in one beautiful, life-changing container. Lauren's greatest current spiritual passion is harnessing the sacred feminine and guiding women and femmies to love themselves and embrace wholeness. She believes awakening feminine folks to their power will be the catalyst for creating a more peaceful and loving world. Lauren has channeled her life experience, expertise, and passion into her first book, Embody Your Inner Goddess, A Guided Path to Radical Wholeness, which will be published November 24th, 2023. Lauren also loves exploring all things spirituality, from the mundane to the mystical. When she isn't working with her clients, creating courses, leading international retreats, teaching yoga, writing, or running her business, you can find Lauren soaking in time with her husband and 2-year-old, working on her garden, enjoying lake life, and watching shows about baking and drag queens. And now, without further ado, here is Lauren. Welcome, Lauren. I'm so honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Shilpa. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and for hosting me on your platform. It's really beautiful what you're doing, and it feels so great to be here.
Wonderful. I'm really interested in all of the work you've been doing. I've been following your work and your story, and I feel like there's a lot of passion there. I mean, there's a lot of heart that you put into your work. So maybe we could start off by just talking about your journey in what I call more of the healing space or the spiritual space.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So I'll start with just right now who I am and what I do, and then rewind a bit. So now I live in the Midwest of the United States in Kansas City, and I'm a mama to a toddler, and I own a yoga studio and teach people how to teach yoga as well. On top of that, I do intuitive work and spiritual coaching, and I'm a first-time author. So all of those things sort of weave together to what I do and how I'm of service to the world. And it definitely came through pain, I think, and looking for change. I think, you know, many of us are born into some sort of religion or some sort of sense of spirituality and connection to the divine. Um, but really finding it for ourselves and finding that authentic connection, I think, is a whole other thing. So for me, it certainly was. I grew up here where I live now, or near here, and it's a very conservative Christian area, and that's how I was brought up. On top of that, uh, I think all over the world, but in the US, there's a lot of cultural messaging around how people and particularly women should act and who we should be and how we should serve and be helpers and nurturers. Um, I was very high achieving academically, as well as like extracurricularly. And I was trying just very hard to fit into this good girl mold, I would call it, of just trying to be good and trying to be everything for everyone in a certain way. And after a certain amount of time, this became really unsustainable for me. I started to burn out. I started to really question what I was taught and really question like the culture I was surrounded by as well. At the same time, I was feeling this dissonance. I also, um, I don't know, I love like the yogic principle of non-harm, and that even before I knew what that was, has been important to me. And instead of like doing harm outward when I was feeling these ways, kind of put it all inside or turned inward. So for me, that developed into a pretty difficult eating disorder that lasted a good 10 years or so. And while it was difficult and there were definitely a lot of dark times in that 10-year path to healing, it also was the catalyst that I needed to start that own journey to what is spirituality to me? Who am I? Why am I here? What is like, who am I within this world? So it was through this dark time that I was introduced to therapy and where I was introduced to yoga for the first time at age 17. And this was over 20 years ago. It was a different atmosphere here. There wasn't yoga all over the place like there is now. And it was something that, although like my family, um, although they were conservative, I wasn't as like sheltered as some of the other families that I lived around. I knew people who weren't even uh, allowed to watch this one cartoon called Tiny Toons, I think, because one of the characters was a yogi duck and she would chant Om and kind of levitate around. And they weren't allowed to watch that because they thought it was like satanic or demonic. So that's the culture I was coming from. But I tried yoga for the first time and it just felt so peaceful. And it was really one of the first times I got to just be alone with myself and to be in this space of like calm and healing in a way that didn't feel forced and let me just be myself. So that's sort of the introduction. I'll maybe fast forward about 10 years of trying and failing different methodologies of healing, of purpose and like career and school, of relationships, all while dealing with anxiety and depression. And at about age 27, I started really taking my healing more seriously. I had moved around a lot, but I moved back home where I had more support financially and with my family and started like trauma therapy. So essentially, I was hooked up to electrodes. I think that's the word, where they're measuring my brain waves. And the nurse practitioner showed me that my brain was in fight or flight, even though I was feeling more or less what I thought was normal at the time. So that therapy helped bring my nervous system to a better state, but I really credit yoga to this like sustainable healing that I've had in my life. And a couple years later, I became a yoga teacher, and then really from there, I also married my husband around that time. Things started to kind of click into place. I started to feel more purposeful, more present, more grounded, and things started going well in a way, if that makes sense, after just feeling like I was hitting a lot of obstacles for a long time before that. So that is kind of my story in a nutshell. And then over the last decade or so, things have evolved with my yoga studio and with retreats and eventually in becoming a mother and turning my work into these less physical and more spiritual and creative realms of writing and intuitive work. So thank you for letting me share all of that.
I love the idea that you were able to recognize concepts that I think a lot of us go through, but there are no ways to put words in it until you've gone through the darkness. Which when you were saying things, I just jotted it down, but just talking about dissonance and then
Mm.
understanding that there was this desire not to harm others, but yet the irony is that we often find ourselves harming ourselves. And there's like this conflict because the very thing we're trying to escape, the pain, we end up inflicting on ourselves. So,
Yeah, for sure. I have a like a short chapter on this in my book where it's really about integrity. The book is divided into the chakra system and it's in the throat, but it is about like are the insides matching the outsides? And you might value ahimsa or not violent nonviolence, but are you cultivating that in your own thoughts? Are you cultivating that in your own body? Or is it just something that you perform outwardly?
mhm,
And I think that's especially for more sensitive folks, for people who want to do good in the world, we need to do that internal examination as well.
yes, absolutely. And you also mentioned that there's like this point of burnout, which often many of us go through, and we don't even know it's burnout. Like you were talking about the fight or flight and the brain signal sending that, and it's become the new normal or the only normal you've ever known in many cases. So having
It does.
go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that it really did blow my mind at the time that when she had told me that, because while I knew that I held anxiety and stress, I didn't know that that was just a body state that I was in, if that makes sense. And, regardless of if you've gone through major trauma or smaller traumas, we do live in this very stressful world. And I think we're all affected by it at different levels.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you were able to find a methodology that may not necessarily resonate with the culture that you were raised in.
I did. And I'm so incredibly grateful for it. One of the nurses at the hospital I was in was a yoga teacher. So at the time, it was like something I didn't have to do. It wasn't part of the therapy, but I was a dancer and I was like, I just want to stretch and move my body. If this is an opportunity to do it, great.
Mhm.
What I was not expecting was the stillness and the breath and like the peaceful space. So I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for that initial exposure because it really did set me on a path of discovery. Beyond that, I'll add that I think however we grow up, it can feel like quote unquote normal, right? It's all we know a lot of times. The kids growing up today have a little bit more exposure, maybe even a lot more than we even did when we were kids. Um, but when we open ourselves up to other ways of life, other cultures, other people's stories, um, I think it's such a good thing for our hearts and our minds because we realize that our way isn't the only way and it's not necessarily the best way either. And beyond that, seeing our differences is important, but we realize how similar we all are,
Yeah.
all over the world. And for me, I felt really isolated at first when I was going through this, but the more I learned and the more I talked to people, the more I really realized that a lot of my experiences were universal, not necessarily the symptoms or the way that, it was working through my system, like through this eating disorder, but in that we struggle, in that we feel darkness, in that we feel unsure of ourselves, in that we just don't have it all figured out. That was at the time something I really needed, as a teenager, because I was pretty naive to that as a kid.
Yes, and I like when I say like, I don't mean as in like, oh, that's a positive necessarily thing, but knowing that many of us that live in our normal and then we grow up recognizing that we're not that different and we can connect with others by connecting through their stories. We're allowing ourselves to expand into a different state of consciousness.
Mm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the healing, I definitely credit to that, but I also really credit it to reading. I've always loved reading, ever since I was a really young child. And so it feels really like full circle now to have authored a book and to be putting my story out there into this, collective of millions and millions of stories that are written now. Um, and maybe it will help someone else feel not so alone.
Yes. And you're the gem over in this part of the Midwest that you live in, because perhaps by your presence and your stories, others will have a very different journey in life.
Thank you. I certainly hope so. And I do think, it's made some ripple effect at this point. And it's interesting. I never thought that I would live here. I never thought I would like live my life here as an adult. I always wanted to get away. I wanted to find people who were more like me or did the things that I liked to do. And I tried that. I moved around, and when I followed my intuition and my heart, it brought me back to this space. And I do think that it is for that specific reason. There are many people doing amazing work, where I live. And I do know that like what I have done has had at least some impact, big or small, on the community, particularly in yoga, which has been uh, really just amazing to see. I definitely didn't bring it here, anything like that, but um, delivering it to people. My studio is donation based, so doing it in a way that's really accessible, has provided opportunity for a lot of people to connect and heal and have community around them when maybe that wouldn't have been available to them before. And that was really important to me because as I was going through this period, as I became an adult and was going through this healing, I'll call it, but also, hurting, um, I would have really benefited from having a community, like a spiritual community or a yoga community with my best interest in mind around me, but it wasn't really financially accessible. So I feel really honored to be able to now be able to provide that for others.
And you mentioned something that I tuned into is you mentioned intuition, and you use your intuition to help others. And there's a multitude of facets to that. And when it comes to the practice, like you mentioned, chakra and conversations where you're able to intuitively understand others. But I think of that really as embodied awareness, embodiment of who you are on so many levels, not only your physical body and your spirit and mind, but beyond that. Maybe you can speak to a little bit about the connection of intuition to embodiment.
Mm, yeah, I love that phrase of embodied awareness because I think, we go through these different phases like in our spiritual journeys, and the first one really is self-awareness, like my goodness, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? And oftentimes, it might come from a dark place, and then it sets us off on these journeys of discovery. And eventually we get to a place where it is embodied. And for me, embodiment is, yeah, that integrity I was speaking to earlier, really where like the mind and the body and the spirit are all in alignment and all matching. And it's like truly, it's not just thinking about a concept, it's truly like being that. So it's not just like thinking about love, it's how do I how do I make love my frequency by my words and my thoughts and my energy and my action? Same thing with awareness, like even cosmic consciousness or something like that. How do I go beyond just like talking about it or worse, even like performing it and make it into like how do I bring it into my body? How do I bring it into my being? How do I bring it into my actions, my frequency? So I love that phrase because I think it's really like what a lot of people are talking about right now. And I think for a very good reason. I think we've all seen spiritual teachers and leaders who do not, what do they say, like walk their talk. They don't actually embody what they are, who they say are saying they are, and what they are teaching. Um, and we're all desiring, I think, this sense of like wholeness and sense of alignment where we feel at peace with how all of our parts are working together in a way. Um, so that will bring me to intuition. And intuition, I think, is something we all have access to, and we probably all talk about it in some way or another. I think we become more embodied in it when we develop a sense of self-trust. So I notice with a lot of my clients or students that they have strong intuitions, but they don't always have the courage yet to follow them or the trust in themselves to do so. So I would say embodied intuition is like, it takes a lot of practice. It takes like building the muscle, and it takes developing that relationship of self-trust over time where, it starts to become really natural. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. From someone who I consider myself intuitive, but yet I often like second guess myself. So it's like this learning process. I need to practice it daily.
Mm,
I think the more I meditate, which I do daily, I learn to trust it more.
yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. And, I'm still in the same boat sometimes. I'll be so sure about something, and then when it's in process, start to the questions pop up of, am I doing the right thing? Especially when you're in that like faith space where like the reality hasn't quite matched to the vision yet. That can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to like relax into that. So I completely identify with what you're saying, and I don't think it's something that we can aim to do perfectly every time. It's just something to be aware of, right? It's something like, I notice that I'm slipping into that space of not trusting myself right now. Let's get curious about that. Maybe let's shine some love on that, rather than spiraling.
I agree. And everything you've said, it resonates with me on so many levels. So I'm so excited to ask you the next question, which you already touched upon, but let's sort of cycle back to it. Is in your practice of having gone through what I'm going to loosely refer to as the pain and the journey and coming through it and still being aware that we're work in progress, all of us. However, you have currently been practicing and walking the walk. It looks like, from everything I know about you, on every level, you truly are aligned or making an authentic effort to be aligned. So knowing that, what do you, how do you define embodied awareness for those who might be thinking, well, that's very esoteric?
Yeah, I think it is. And thank you for seeing that in me. I'll say, um, the effort is there. Am I like aligned all the time? Absolutely not. There's there's so much going on in the world, and there's a lot to to digest and a lot to consider a lot of times. So I think, going into those darker spaces, sometimes it's probably needed, right? To see the light in a way. Yeah, embodied awareness. I would say it can look a lot of different ways. Um, I guess I'll maybe just give some practical examples. And I'd love to know too, like what your thoughts are on it, because this is your phrase and I'm really curious about it. But when I think about it, I think like taking a walk in nature, and not just the act of taking the walk. It's like actually being present to it, right? It's like hearing the leaves or the rocks beneath your feet and looking at the trees and hearing water, birds, or whatever it is around you, instead of taking a walk in nature and like mentally not even really being there. It might look like we're mothering, right? Like, are we fully present with our kids? I'll be honest, I'm not fully present with my kid all the time, but I do try to make those concentrated efforts throughout the day to try and fill both of our cups. So Are the phones down? Are we engaging in, well, she's almost 3, so we have conversations. They're not, like this, but they're conversations. But am I trying my best to like meet her where she's at? Are we having fun and playing together and getting like lost in the flow of that? Um, so for me, those are two like really practical examples from my life. I'm just using like household stuff right now, like uh, preparing dinner. Am I putting love into it? Am I maybe thinking about where the food came from and the hands that touched it? Or am I going through the motions? So for me, I'd say maybe it's the opposite of going through the motions in your life, and it's really being present to all of it, the good and the difficult, and letting yourself feel it all.
I love that response, and I love the fact that you tied it to everyday things, everyday experiences, because that's something that all of us can relate to. So,
Yeah.
to answer your question, why did I choose embodied awareness? Is I very purposefully designed the year of my podcast around themes that I thought were really tied to my 4 pillars: spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. And I thought the culmination of all the entire year of the topics that go really deep, like the beginning of the year, I talked about what does it mean to live a spiritual lifestyle. So that was like the January of 2023. Now coming to this end of this year, I thought, what would we talk about? And I thought, what about talking about the embodiment of everything is that we've covered? Like we've talked about all facets of who we are. And what I mean by this, we're energy, but maybe on a physical level, we're a mind. Maybe on a daily basis, from day-to-day action, we need to tune into the mindfulness, like you were talking about, going for a walk and really tuning in with the grass underneath your feet and being aware that the earth, the magnetic energy of the earth is flowing through you. And then bringing it to now, I I sincerely believe that for myself, it's a work in progress. I'm continually like going, okay, well, here's a little bit of awareness in terms of when I meditate, I can be aware that I'm now feeling so much stillness that it's peace. But where is that peace coming from? Or it could be the fact that when I nourish myself well, that's embodying something on a physical level. So it's multiple things. And then as you probably are aware, there's different bodies around us. And those bodies are still part of who we are and connected to spirit. So maybe it got very esoteric in my mind. I was hoping by the end of the year, I wouldn't have guests kind of ask me like, what does this even mean? But you got it. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
You did, and you answered it so beautifully. And it's okay to get esoteric with it. I think what I love about it is, in a way it does sound complicated, but it's really very holistic. And you're talking about like all the different bodies around you. Yes, we have these different bodies. So when we're talking about embodiment, it's not just physical. It's truly like all the different layers of what makes us who we are. Um, so I'm right there with you. My mind works very similarly to that.
I sincerely enjoyed our conversation, and I hope I can bring you back in the future because I I just loved everything you had to say and express in your story. I was almost in tears in the beginning when you shared your journey. So thank you for sharing your embodied awareness.
Thank you, Shilpa. It's such an honor to share, and I'm so glad I have this platform to do so. I truly hope it helps. And I want to thank you, one, for having me, but two, for um, your embodied awareness and for sharing your message and for hosting these conversations. They're so important. And there are a lot of people I think that don't really get to have these kinds of conversations in their day-to-day life. So you're providing that connection for them, and it's such a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And you're absolutely right. These conversations have been such a blessing. I have such gratitude for it, and such gratitude for my guests, because you bring light into my life.
How lovely.
Well, I hope you have a lovely end of the year. Hopefully one time next year we can connect.
I would love to connect again. Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll stay connected. Bye, love.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in, sweet soul. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful for your kind review on Apple Podcast. Simply click on the link in the show notes to leave your lovely feedback and uplift our spirits. Your support means the world to me and helps our show thrive. So please show me your love and continue to practice Omni Mindfulness.